Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
It's very good to be here. And so I get to introduce somebody new to you guys that most of you have not met. And this is Bill Kaler. And so most of you guys know me as Esther Fair. Before it was Benny and Esther. Bill used to be Bill and Martha Kaler. And now we have a whole, new us. And we're going to be sharing about that today a little bit. And so I feel like it was 5 years ago that we moved to Bolivia, Benny and I. And we were back once, and then it was 2020, 2021, and it was lockdown, and we hardly seen anybody. So that was very disappointing. And then last year I was back for like little bit, met some of you, was in church once. And so really it's been very little that I've been able to connect back with the church in the last 5 years. And so we're excited to be here. And we figured, we were debating a little bit what we should be sharing today. And Albert and Josie said, well, people need to get to know you guys again. And I see so many new faces here in church that I didn't know 5 years ago, because maybe you guys came in the last 5 years. And so we want to introduce ourselves a little bit.
I see a lot more new faces.
So this whole trip that we're doing, we were in Kansas and now Ontario, and then we're going to Manitoba and then Alberta. This part of the trip, I know more people, so Bill has to meet a whole bunch of new people. And then in Manitoba and Lacrete, I'm going to be the stranger.
Just wait till we get to Lacrete, and then
you're
going to be the one nervous, not me.
Yeah, so just before we get started, we brought you guys some Bolivia coffee. And so we think that we have really good coffee in Bolivia. So this is actually Bill's daughter-in-law's brother that makes this coffee. We think it's very good.
It rivals Tim Hortons any day.
Yeah, it's Café Yungas, so we call it the youngest coffee. And so Dimitri, do you want to grab this? You are the coffee guy back there. And so next Sunday, you guys get Bolivian coffee on us. So, and see how that will be. Okay, so we have our first slide up here. I don't know if anyone can still read Plotdic, but it says Dot leven. Back up one slide. Dot leven met Bill and Esther. It means the life with Bill and Esther. And later we're going to talk about it a little bit. Our radio program that we do live is called Dot leven met Bill and Esther.
So the life, yet it could be anything. Our life is wild.
Yeah, so we're going to get started with sharing our story, and hopefully you guys can get to know us better, and we hope that we can connect with some of you as we're here yet as well. We're here till the 19th, and then we move on, or move to go to Manitoba. So next slide.
The one on your left, I think it will be. That's my family. I'm the little one sitting in there. It's hard to imagine. I had white hair back then. I'm starting to get back to that stage of my life again. I think I'm getting a little bit more childish as life goes on. But I have 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother. And I don't know, maybe some of you may know my brother. His name is Alan Kaler. Well, it was just announced Daryl Kaler was coming here. It's my nephew. And so I'm pretty proud of him too. So I recommend him as well. We've taken his course.
Very good course. Yeah.
Very good. And so I was born in Manitoba, and I moved to Bolivia with my parents. My dad was, this was taken a little bit before that, but he became a minister in the Rhinelander Church, and he was selected to be one of the ministers that took the first group of Rhinelander over to Bolivia. And so I moved with my parents to Bolivia when I was 10 years old. I was in grade 5. Halfway through when we moved, so I learned to speak English from Yehai, and so Plotdic and English has always been, both of them, equally my mother tongue. So it doesn't really matter to me in particular what language I speak of those two. Of course, I know some High German and some Spanish as well. But I was born into this family. My dad's name is Abram Kaler, a minister in the Rhinelander Church. And so that's a little bit about my childhood story. So, Esther, you want to talk a little bit about yours?
Do you want to talk about how you got saved as part of it?
Part of I got saved. Okay. Then I'm going to go. I was 10 years old when we moved to Bolivia. I went through my youth years in Bolivia, which we lived in the colony with, yazats and like rules, everything by rules. And so I don't have good memories of my youth. I love youth, for the reason is My youth experience was not good. It could have been better, and I know. And when I look at some of you youth, man, I'm like a righteous jealousy that I have. I wish I would have had some of the opportunities that you guys have. And so grab those opportunities and appreciate them, because I didn't have them. And so that's one of the reasons I have a heart for young people. And so but there was two things that helped me to get saved. I was saved in the colony, which is incredible. That just about never happens. My dad was a born-again believer, but he had a lot of fear of people. He couldn't share his testimony openly in a church like we can today. That's another privilege that we have that we don't appreciate as much as I think we should. But he would share his testimony occasionally when he was sitting around friends. And the other thing that led me to salvation was the old-fashioned Mennonite catechism. Who's familiar with the catechism? I have an appreciation for that book. Is that the Bible? Absolutely by no means. But it led me a large part, because the plan of salvation is in there very, very clearly. It's in the High German language. Well, it's been translated to Plautdietsch now too. But it's generally in the High German language. But if you know any High German, it is clear as day is in there. And so I learned these two things. And when we'll talk about that a little bit later, when I wanted to get married to my first wife, Martha, I knew that my life was not in order. The way that I was living, I couldn't go forward. This would lead to total destruction. I got a word from the Holy Spirit, and he said to me, there's a fork in the road. You can take either this road or you can take that road. You pick. I don't like that. But I knew which the right one was, and yes, I chose the Jesus route. And so, even though I was in the colony, I didn't tell anybody. I told Martha. She was born again when she was a younger girl, also in Canada. And so we were born again believers when we got married. When we got baptized, we were born again. When we got married, we were born again believers. But we never did grow in Christ. And so that's where my faith journey started.
Okay, and so the next picture, me in the little red dress. That's me. And that was my family, born of a family of 7. And and anyways, my parents, I was born in Mexico. My parents were in the Klein Gemeinde Church, and my dad was pastor there. So my parents' background comes out of Old Colony, and then they got saved, and then moved to the Klein Gemeinde Church. And then when I was 5, then we moved here to Canada. And so then we came to this church way back when. And so we came to this church and attended this church almost all my life that I attended this church. How should I say? My parents, like the first part of my family growing up would have known my parents still as not saved, and so they had a different experience growing up. They remember very clearly the change in my home when my parents got saved. So by the time I came along, it was a Christian home that I was born into. So from the time I was little, I was hearing Bible stories. I was going, to church, to Sunday school. I remember, just having, my parents told me always that if you need an answer, it's in the Bible. And so I got a little tricycle. I didn't know how to pedal, but they told me the answers were in the Bible. So I went and got my little New Testament, couldn't even read. It was a little High German New Testament, sat down on my little tricycle and read, because the answers were in the Bible. Put the New Testament away and started pedaling. And so, that was, honestly, when I look back, I feel like that was my first experience of faith in God. And it was just this childlike faith. And so you can see that the home I grew up in was, I was very privileged. A lot of my theological teaching has come from my dad. Discussions in the living room, what does this mean? What do you think of this, Dad? And so stories and all those things. But anyways, when I was 8, I got saved at VBS and really I feel like my spiritual journey has started even sooner. It's always hard when you grow up in a Christian home, because sometimes, when does this actually happen? But that's where I really realized it's not just my parents that will save me. I need to make a decision. And from there, I started growing. And obviously, I've had other moments in my life where God has become more real and more Lord over my life, I guess.
I was just a few weeks shy of 21 when I got married to my first wife, Martha. You can see us there in that picture. We were farmers, we were pioneers, we were started in a brand new area in Bolivia where there was forest, and so I think I'm maybe one of the last pioneers in the world. I don't know, not for sure, but this was pioneer life. There was bush all around us, and we were living in a very simple home, but one thing I did realize, that Martha and I, seriously, we really did love each other. And you can live in a very low, poor house. If there's love in the house, it's a good place to be. I have very fond memories of these days. Even though it was very primitive, I have very fond memories. So if you're complaining to me that you're poor, I'm going to ask you, is there love in the house? If you say there's love in the house, no pity from me.
So Benny and I, a lot of you recognize this face. Benny was also born in Mexico, and that's where we met. We met there, started dating at the end of Bible school in Mexico, and then moved here to Canada. And you know, when I brought Benny here, you guys remember his English was a little rocky on the rocks, and yet he loved people, and he could be a friend to everyone, and you guys know that. And so we got married here in Canada when I was 21 years old, and we started our life here, lived here 14 years in Canada together as married.
This is our young family. I want to go a little bit of background on Martha. Before we got married, Martha was born into a family of 14 children, and she was the second oldest of the girls. There was first a girl, a boy, and then a girl. That was Martha. And Martha's oldest sister was just married. One morning, they got the news that her dad had tipped over with a tractor and got killed. And there were 13 children in the home, and a devastated mom, naturally. And Martha was the oldest oldest girl in the house at that time. And when we look for, and now I want to speak a little bit to the youth and the young people, when you look for somebody that you would like to spend your life with, you look for a person with character. And so I was watching Martha and I, we just barely started dating, and I didn't know, do I want this girl or not? Yes, she was pretty, but just a pretty face and giggling girls, I don't know if I really respect that very much. And there's got to be more substance to the person than that. And so I watched her, and she took over a household of 14 people, mother that was devastated. And there was a whole row of children. Her youngest sister was 2 years old, and she took over that household. She made the meals, she got the clothes washed, she got the house cleaned, and she did that at the age of 17. And then I thought to myself, this is a girl I want to live with. This is much more than a pretty face. And so we got married and lived in that little house that I showed you before. We had 3 children. It was Nellie, Elena, and Billy were our children. And shortly before this picture was taken, then her mother and her sister, they died in a fire accident, in a home fire accident. And so they were left over with 6 orphans children still at home. Naturally, we were married already. We lived a little bit of a distance away. And so there was a lot of hurt in that family, a lot of things. And in the colony, it's a very difficult thing to be orphaned or even widowed. It was very difficult there. And so we stood by and watched a lot of hurt. We can talk about that later, but there's a few books that have been written by Martha's sisters, 2 sisters. And so we experienced a lot of that. And so this is our journey has been a lot of ups and downs, and God has brought us to a large thing. I really did appreciate that last song we just sang. And I'm going to harp on that a little bit more later, because this whole thing is called, the first slide was, Dot Leven, the life. It's the calling. Why are we called, and how does God call? And so I'm going to be speaking on that a little bit more. And so we moved back to Canada when I was 33 years old. I was 10 years old when I moved to Bolivia, and I was 33 when we moved back to Canada. And simply because of this, let me explain the story a little bit. Because Martha and I were born again, we couldn't agree with the colony's way of teaching, the legalistic, the extreme legalism that we experienced. We could not agree with that. Our children, they started coming home and says, "Mom, you're going to go to hell because your kerchief is a little bit too small." And that's what they were being taught. They were being indoctrinated by things that we did not agree with whatsoever. And so we needed to leave. There was nowhere to go. There were no evangelical churches in the area, so we needed to do something. And myself being a farmer, and for our age, a successful farmer, and I loved farming. I really, really love farming. You know, that land that we opened there, that was not just bought somewhere and then made payments on it. There was forest. It was blood, sweat, and tears. And when you have invested blood, sweat, and tears, you've got sentimental value in this. It is more than just a piece of land. This is a part of me. And so when I asked God, what do I do? What do I do? And I was the leader of this family. What do I do? And this is what he asked me. He said, "Bill, what are you willing to sacrifice for the salvation of your wife and your children?" That's an interesting question, I thought to myself. Well, my answer was this: Lord, I'll give you everything except the farm. And he wasn't even angry with me. 2 months later, there's a knock. He asked exactly the same question. "Bill, what are you willing to sacrifice for the salvation of your wife and children?" And I said the same thing, everything except the farm. The Holy Spirit went away. A gentle knock, asked me exactly the same question. Probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times, till I actually said, "Lord, I will give you everything, including the farm." That was, other than accepting the Lord, that was probably the best decision of my whole life. I said, "Lord, I will give you everything." We sang that song, "I am available." I made myself available. I allowed myself to be available. And that their youths played these dominoes. You put them in a row and you tip one over to go. That's what happened in my life.
So we lived here in Elmer, Ontario, right in this area for 14 years, like I said. Benny worked at Remtech for most of the time we were here. A lot of you, we have some people here working there now still, right? It was good. We had a good life here. Right from in Bible school already, when I got to know Benny, both of our hearts were to serve the Lord. And so from the moment we got married, I feel like we were in different areas of ministry. The first year of our marriage, we helped at the Blenheim Church, the EMMC Blenheim Church, so we always had to drive an hour from Elmer to go there, and then we switched over to this church, and we became youth leaders here, and then I would help with women's ministry stuff, MOPS or Life Together Women, whatever women's ministry was going on. Benny was part of the board. Later, just before we left, we were ordained as pastor of care, so kind of in the deacon area. And so we loved serving. And so that was our life. We worked, but we loved to be involved and serving God. And really, we just wanted to be faithful. And I always sensed that in Benny, too. He just wanted to be faithful to God's call, whatever it would be for us. And so that was our life here. We had our 4 children, Danae, Tyson, Isabella, and Marcus. They're all here today and are a little bit bigger than that. And so, but yeah, it was really good to start our family here, and we really had a good life here.
So Martha and I, we moved, first of all, to Manitoba for 2.5 years, but then we moved to Lacrete, and we got involved in the church in Lacrete. I'm a huge fan of small groups, Bible study groups. That's where, in our experience, that's where we again started, the rubber hit the road, and we started making progress in our faith, and which was really, really good for us. And that was the Bricktaller Church in Lacrete that gave us that opportunity where we could grow in our faith. And so by the time we got there was so many years as being a Christian, but just dead in the water, just dead. And so we were so thankful that we could start experiencing our salvation and the freedom that salvation brings. And so we got very active in church. We became youth leaders. We did that for 3 years. We burned our candle at both ends doing that. We were elected as a deacon couple, served as 3 years as a deacon couple in a church. And I was elected as an assistant pastor in our church. And little over a year later, we were elected for the senior pastor of the Lacrete Town Bricklayer Church. Served as a lead pastor for 7 years in that church when we were called to Bolivia. And the reason, how I understood the Holy Spirit, the reason we were called to Bolivia, and I'm hoping that it happens in this church, we were a church, we were a growing church, it was a large church. We built another church as we were there. Because we did dual services, there were between 650 and 750 people attending our church at that time. We built another church and split the congregations up, so we only did one service again. But and our church was growing to a degree, and then it was at a standstill. And so we had, the structure was all in place. We had a pastor, we had deacons, we had Sunday school teachers, we had song leaders. Everything was in place. Now let's keep it the way we have it. Finally, we made it to a place where we like to have. In the colonies, they call it this way: let's just keep it status quo. And that is dead. That is deadly for the church. If you want to go status quo, that is deadly. So God called us out of the lead pastor position, and now everybody had to step up. But the tendency in churches, mature churches, that a church that has been in function for 20, 30 years, that is one of the main things that brings a church back down. That is, we want to keep it status quo. Don't change anything. And then we're going to all be happy. And that's a bad place to be spiritually. So we were called to Bolivia. I don't want to go into the whole story exactly how we were called, but we had lived in Bolivia. Both of us had lived in Bolivia for a long time. We knew the culture. We understood the colony. We spoke Low German well. Our Spanish was reasonable, and so we understood the people, the country, and everything. And so why did God do not call us? And Martha and I, we would ask that question, occasionally. And it wasn't. He didn't call us until one day. It was clear as day that we were called to go to Bolivia. And so we adhered to that call.
So, and for us, how did we end up in Bolivia? So some of you remember us sharing our story when we left here. Some of you don't know us, and some of you don't know the story. So I'm going to just summarize a little bit of what happened. First off, the only thing I had ever heard about Bolivia was my entire dad's side of the family lived in Bolivia. And they were all in the colony, so I just heard a lot of darkness, a lot of bondage. If my parents would come back from there, they were always sad that their families were not saved. And they had they really wanted to see their brothers and sisters come to Christ, or like my dad's brothers and sisters and families. And so I just heard a lot of darkness. And then in 2013, there was a Plotić song, a Low German song that came out, Ekaran and Jevnich Ab, that came out, and I thought, wow, this is a really neat song. It's in like our mother language, like in Plotić, and it was well done. And I thought, it must come out of Mexico. And then I found out it was out of Bolivia. And I was like, there's good that comes out of Bolivia. And somehow,
who would have thought?
Yeah. Somehow God started a pounding heart in me for Bolivia. I had never felt that before, and there was some other things that happened at the same time that I just felt like we need to be in Bolivia. Like I was ready to pack bags in 2013 to go to Bolivia to serve, and yet Benny was like, I'm not feeling this. And so I was like, this is interesting. And some of you guys know our story. We were open. He was open to God's calling on our life, that's for sure. And so he felt that God was calling us to Mexico. And so I said, okay, I'm good with Mexico too. I'll support Benny, and I would be just as good with that. And so we put our house up for sale. It didn't sell for a year, and we started doubting and questioning, and yeah, Abe Dyke comes over and says, "You're not listening to God," and that was a good thing. We were trying to figure this out because he had sensed that from the Holy Spirit. There's something we're missing too, and we were in a confused time. Finally, we just said, you know what? Forget Mexico. We took our house off the market. We are like, we're going to wait here until we hear from God exactly. If he's not opening doors, then obviously he has something else in mind. And in the whole time, while we were in this time, I would sometimes pray. I still have journal entries of this, like, God, if we, even in the Mexico thing, I'm good with moving to Mexico, but why do I still feel Bolivia, and why does Benny not feel it? Like, God doesn't call a couple in two different directions. Like, you're one, you should be having the same calling that goes together, and that didn't make sense to me. But I thought, okay, God, you know what you're doing. And so, because the pounding for Bolivia was still there, even though Benny didn't feel it. Anyways, turns out that that finally, years later, I think 2017, we had already decided, well, we'll just go. In 2018, Benny said, yeah, let's save up. We'll just do a trip to Bolivia, like just a trip. Okay. And then we were at Caring for the Heart Counseling in October 2017, and we get a phone call from an Abe Giesbrecht, who is on the EMMC mission board, and he says, have you guys ever considered serving in Bolivia? And I was like, and we didn't expect this call. And Benny, all of a sudden there, it's like something woke up in him. Oh, maybe God is calling us to Bolivia. And so then from there, we started praying about it. We took a trip in May 2018 to Bolivia, and with a lot of prayer, and God, is this really what you want of us? And one of the things most important for us, to give us confirmations of whether we should go or not, because we knew we didn't want to go there if it wasn't God's will. We wanted 100% confirmation that we should go. And so to me, it was very important that our kids felt called as well, because we were going to go as a family. And they were young. Like, look at them. They were young. Marcus was 4, so it was 4, 6, 8, 10, the ages when we moved. And yet, I wanted them to feel peace with our move too. I know they couldn't just help us decide to move, but it was important that they had peace with it. So that was one thing. I wanted that our family would support us, and that our church would feel like that we should go, and the support. And so as we talked to all these people and the board of elders, they prayed for us. They took a few weeks and just prayed and came back, and all of them, I think it was 100% support. Yeah, you guys need to go. Like, we knew this was coming. And so that was what confirmed it for us. And finally we had to step, how should I say, put our feet into the water and walk it. So we had to apply and go through the process of applying for missions. But that's how we got to Bolivia.
So what did we do in Bolivia? And so some of the pictures, I'll briefly go over them. You can see the top left-hand corner there. There we're at a Bible study. You can actually see the face of Didi Harms. He would come and give us a hand there from time to time. And the bottom there, that's when we had our first school meeting. We were in the colony. We were working in the Nueva Esperanza colony, a very hostile area. We could tell you stories for hours of that. We won't do that today, but we started a church inside the colony in a very, very behind enemy lines, you would call it, and they tried to do all kinds of bad things to us. They threatened to burn our truck. They threatened to kill us. They've threatened everything in the book. They never did. We were always protected by God, and so in mysterious ways, and we could tell you a lot of stories about that. There was one of the older couples there, you can see in the middle picture. I also did radio back then already. So I got into radio in the beginning when we were in Bolivia. We started there with radio in one of the rooms in our house. I still, to this day, I love doing radio. And so you should listen to our radio sometimes. I can turn on my radio voice anytime I want to. So you are listening to RCB here in Mount Salem, 99.1 FM. And that's fun, by the way, doing that. The bottom corner there's a tree. That's where we started in the Hacienda Verde, where we started there. We purchased that land in 2015 and started a congregation there in the beginning of 2016. We started a congregation there. We found that in the colony, the people that we were meeting there was spiritual fatigue was setting in, and they were getting weaker and weaker, so we started another community. And so that's where Esther and I, where we actually live in right now.
Okay, so Benny and I and our family, we got to Bolivia and we started serving right away. The kids went through a bit of a culture shock, I think more than Benny and I did because we both knew Mexico living quite a bit, but the kids, they came there not knowing German, they came there not knowing Spanish and were thrown into school, like get there one day into Hacienda Verde where we were gonna live, next day start school. They didn't know anyone, they didn't know the language, we felt lost. That was the only time I think I questioned, what are we doing to our kids? Like, is this okay what we're actually doing? And yet we trudged through, and now our kids are very, very comfortable in here. And so we started off with radio. We were thrown into radio ministry. We knew that going into it, not a lot of experience. I think that Benny's time at Remtech prepared him for this because he didn't get a lot of training at Remtech either. You just kind of, the time that he started there, you kind of ask some questions, then you trial and error, and you learn. And so with radio, that was the same thing. He improved.
I was a mission director, and so here's the radio. Like, go in there. I've got something else to do right now. Huh?
I remember the first time Bill said, here's the radio. This is where you press on, and then you're live. And this is where the songs are. Go.
This is how I learned to swim. Huh? I was with the big boys. And I was the small boy, and there was the big boy. So on Sunday afternoon, we were swimming in the dugout, but I couldn't swim. So the big boys just threw me into the deep end, and they went eat fastball. And so if he comes back, I guess he can swim. That was my training.
So that's what he did to us at the radio. And so, anyways, but we started really enjoying serving. Benny loved his job. A lot of you have talked about it was Benny's gift, really at the end of his life yet that he could serve in Bolivia, and it really was.
So Benny and Esther and I, we became very good friends. By this time when Esther came there, Martha had passed away. And like I mentioned before, a lot of tragedy has happened in that family. Martha's brother got killed in a plane crash suddenly, of course. And Martha got mauled by dogs and died an hour later. And so we were serving on the field, in mission field, and that's how some of these things, they happen. And, when tragedies strike, you kind of ask God, okay, what's up? Why are you doing this? And so, but Benny and I, we worked together really, really well. And we became very, very good friends. And so we became good friends with Esther as well as Benny, and we worked together all the time. And it was a lot of fun working with Benny. He became a very, very dear friend to me. And as you know him well, he's become a very good friend to many of you, and he became a very good friend to me. So what now? That's the question we ask. What now? After Martha passed away, like a week or so later, I went to Canada. I just wanted to be with my children and grandchildren. And so I was open to the idea, maybe God has closed that chapter in my life. Maybe he has a different thing for me. And so I came to Canada, asking God, just tell me. I had already enough experience that when he calls, I'm fine. I'm confident. I have faith in him. He will carry me through because he's done it before. And so, but he said nothing. There was not a peep out of God. And I told God, he said, God, if you are not going to call me to something else, I am going back until you call me elsewhere. You're going to have to tell me because I don't know. And so I went straight back. I was here for 3 weeks in Canada. It was too long. And so I just wanted to go back because that's where I felt that God had not finished with me yet. It was naturally, as you can imagine, it was a very, very difficult time for me. And so, but then you ask you the question, okay, what now?
So, so Martha had passed away before we had even moved to Bolivia. So we never got to know Martha. And so Benny and I were serving with Bill. We loved it. We became good friends. He was our boss, but also a good friend. And we did a lot of radio programs together. And Benny had tons of more dreams, but he got sick. And so what we all didn't expect, he passed away on June 3rd, 2021. And that was hard. It was a time where no one could travel much. And yet God, I don't know, like I could have never imagined that family and people couldn't come to the funeral. I wouldn't have ever been able to imagine that. And yet God carried us through. And so it was hard. And like I said, that was one of the things that we had asked for when we moved here, that it was a confirmation that if the going got tough there, we didn't want to doubt if we should, did we make the right decision to move to Bolivia? Well, this got tough. And yet at the same time, in my heart, I was still at peace where I was at. And so I asked the kids, what do we do? Do we move back to Canada? And they said, no way, this is home. Bolivia is home. And that was the same thing that I felt. And so that's why we stayed. God's calling was higher than our circumstances.
So what do? We decided to keep on serving, the best we could. Now, I felt like when Martha was gone, I felt like one leg had been taken away. So I was hopping around on crutches, spiritually speaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to go forward, but I would hop on one leg then. If I got one leg left, I'm going to serve with one leg. I'm speaking in parables here. And so we kept on serving. I kept on preaching. We were building the community. I kept on helping with the community building. We did Bible studies in the colonies, so we did that. There was a lot of people were helping us. I did weddings. I've done a lot of weddings in my life. I love young people, and so they still wanted me to do some weddings. And so I would put on a brave face, when you come to church in the morning. But when you're, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but when you're laying in bed at 2 o'clock at night crying, then the real you comes out. And these things, they happen to us. They've happened to you. What do? You get up in the morning and you go serve again, the best you can. God is not here to judge us on how well we serve. He is here to judge us on if we're faithful to what we have, not on what we don't have. And so I continued serving.
And I did the same. So I continued serving in where the calling was clear, and so we continued serving, like in radio, in Bible studies that I helped with, in visitations. I remember that bottom picture where I'm sitting with that circle of ladies in the colony. I went there, was my cousin's wife. He passed away a month after Benny did, and he was saved, and his whole family had gotten saved. And I went to visit this other widow, and I remember I had to drive 4 hours to go see her. And I went by myself, and she was shocked that I pulled in. She's like, "No one's with you? You drove all by yourself?" And because that's not normal out there, that first of all women would drive and that far. And I said, "Yeah." I said, but I wasn't by myself, like God was with me. And I told her that was actually good for me. Sometimes I needed to just be by myself because I often didn't get a lot of by myself moments. And so I said it was actually a good thing. And so I felt like sometimes our community people didn't quite know how to handle me.
She's a pretty independent woman. Surprised she married me.
Because the only thing was that they sometimes, I think the picture they had seen of anyone losing their husband was they needed help with everything now, with driving, with finances, with you name it, they would need help with everything. And so I think the community just expected I would now need help with everything. And I think all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, she knows how to do some of this stuff. And so one of the things there was a lot of things I didn't know how to do though, by the way. Like there was so many things that I was like, shoot, I don't know what to do without this. But I felt like the things that I could do, I did do. And where I needed help, I asked for help. Like I'm not a handy woman, like handy man. Like Benny was the handy man. And so if stuff needed to be done in the house, that's where I would ask for help. Or mechanics or those kind of things. Because that I had no idea with. But I could travel, I could drive, I could speak the language, I could go to doctors, I could do all that kind of stuff by myself, and the community had never seen that before, actually.
so in our life, like we were friends before, and but I had the mindset, Esther had the mindset, and people would ask me, because I was a widow for almost 6 years before we got married, and so they would ask me, Bill, why don't you get married? And I said, well, there's only two types of women that would have me anyway, and those were the desperate and the crazy. And, and I can't have a desperate woman. And so I chose the crazy. And but naturally, like I was lonely, and what I did say to many people, that my calling is this: if I would have had to, suppose in like my hometown is Lacrete, if I was to get married and move to Lacrete with nothing to do other than sit on a rocking chair and have Knoxoat, like I would go nuts, and not only mentally nuts, I would go spiritually nuts, because that's not my calling. My calling is not Knoxoat. Well, I like Knoxoat. I'm using this as an example again. But there's got to be more life than that, because God has a calling for us. And I said, I will never, ever, I will not give up my calling for no woman. And I said that. And so...
And that was the same for me. When I thought of being alone was hard. I'm very much a companion kind of person. I mean, I need alone time too, but just doing life by myself without a partner was hard. You know, you can have a lot of social activities, you can be with people all day, but when you go to bed at night, you're by yourself. And I missed that. Like, I missed not having a partner in life. And so when I would think sometimes, could I stay alone the rest of my life? And I didn't think I could. But I knew that this second time around, getting married would be maybe more difficult, because now there's kids involved, and it's almost a bigger decision. It affects more people. And so I remember a few times thinking, man, if Bill was younger. Like, because we were already on the same journey. Like, we had the same calling, because that was my thing too. I didn't want to leave my life in Bolivia and the call of God to go get married to someone who I would meet somewhere else. I knew my calling was in Bolivia, and Bill's was too, and I thought, man, God, like, how come this is like this? Like I already knew him, and yet our age difference was big, and so what do we do? And so, you know, I started praying about it. I said, okay, God, I said, if this is actually from you, like, that I have these thoughts, that I would consider it, finally, I said, okay, then Bill would have to approach me about it, and I thought, no, he wouldn't be that crazy.
You never know.
Apparently, I got the crazy one too. and then second was that my kids would be okay with it, that they would have to have peace with it, and that my family, or the people that knew both of us, would understand, like that they would also, and so kind of the same process of the calling to come here. And so, guess what? Sure enough, all of a sudden, this was shortly after a year after Benny passed away, sorry. Then all of a sudden I sensed, oh boy, I think Bill's gonna talk to me about this. Because we had still worked together, it was always professional, we had never had any conversation that alluded to that. And so all of a sudden I noticed, okay, it's actually probably gonna happen that he's gonna talk to me about it. And then I got really nervous, and I started praying about it more intensively. And you can go to the next slide. And we did talk about it, and so one thing led to the next, and I talked to my kids about it. They were all actually very excited. One of the things that they always said, if I would ever get remarried, it was very important to them that the person had known Daddy. I think somehow they thought that they would understand our family better. And so my family was, I think my parents, as being, this is their youngest daughter, were obviously a little bit like, okay, is this the right thing? But they gave us their blessing as well. And also my brothers, my big brothers, who are protective over little sisters, I was shocked at the response that they said, we would actually feel better if you were with Bill out there.
Even Pete gave us a big supper last night.
The brisket was good. But so basically, we had prayed about it, and I had prayed I prayed a lot about it, because for us, the challenge, would this be a challenge, our age difference or whatever? But one of the things that God spoke very clearly to me about is that Benny died. Bill had COVID. See, my fear was, am I going to lose a husband again right away? Bill had COVID the year before Benny, and we didn't know if he was going to make it. And he survived. And Benny died at 39, and he was a strong man. They were both strong men. But I couldn't just let this age. If God was bringing us together, then it was the only thing going to stand in my way was the age. So what I had to look at is death doesn't just go by age, and I don't know how many years God will give us. I don't. But I had to say, okay, God, if you're calling us together and you have a purpose for us together, then whatever happens in our future, just like everyone else's futures are unknown, that is my calling, whatever our future now holds together. And so what God has in store for us, how many years we're going to have, we're going to take it. We're going to...
God's calling is a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster ride. You know, any which way you take it, it's always, you never know what's going to be around the bend. And I was telling Esther that I intend to see her grow old. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's my intention. So I may live to be 105 to see that, but I will.
Bill doesn't quit dreaming. So he said Martha had always told him that if Bill ever died, on his gravestone, she would put, Bill thinks he's dead, but it's all in his head.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to know anyone that does positive thinking or just always is hoping and dreaming and stuff, talk to Bill. And so...
you tell me a bunch of negative stories, I'll probably tell you that's all in the head. It's...
Anyways, we're going to speed up real quick here. So we got married, and
lived happily ever
guess who showed up at the wedding?
Wedding?
You guys remember these people.
Hey.
So they showed up, so that was really special.
Very special for us.
They showed up almost late because we had to move our wedding day 2 days closer because of bloqueos.
You never know what's going to happen.
In Bolivia.
It's the life of Bill and Esther.
So keep going. So these are now our kids. Those are Bill's 3 kids. And
They came to our wedding, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And next slide. And so there's 2 families brought together. So there's a few people missing here, 1 son-in-law and 5 grandchildren.
5 grandchildren, yeah.
So I'm grandma, guys. Those 2 little sweet children there call me Gross Mamita and Gross Papito. And so they're, Anita is Spanish, and so they're linguists, and so Spanish, English, German, all the above.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
So, what now? Now we're 2 crazy lives brought together, and now, what now? And so we're going to tell you a little bit about what we do right now. This is our MEM team. We serve on a team, MEM, called MEM because it's Misión Evangélica Menonita. And so our main goal is to reach the Low German-speaking Mennonites, although we're not opposed to outside cultures at all, but that is our main goal, what we do. And so we work together with a really good group of people coming from 6 different countries and coming from 11 different churches. We work together. It's a melting pot. It's very challenging, but it's a lot of fun. We get together. We get along really, really well.
So we don't go to Bolivia to start EMC churches, EMMC churches. We go there and we all kind of serve together, and we just start churches for Christ. And so whatever the local area needs, we try to... so the base, obviously, the foundation is Jesus, and then we work with what the culture is
This
there.
is part of our radio. Du hörs nu Radio del Campo Boliviano. Du hörs nu Dort Leben med Bill and Esther.
So we do a lot of interviews, different things on the radio. The next slide is our Plotich radio team up there. So we are the ones that do the live stuff on the radio. That's our Radio del Campo board, because we actually have 6 radio stations. MEM owns 2 of them, and we do it in languages of Quechua, Spanish, and Low German. We only do the Low German. We can't speak Quechua yet. Quechua is the indigenous language there. And so we do a lot of different events. You can see like a Zingafast, a Sing festival, that goes over really well out there. Next slide. And we make a lot of programs too. We pre-make programs, Bible study programs. We're doing a youth program right now that's airing now in January. It's called Up Yananeng Darp. And so that means on that side of town, or I'm not sure.
On that side of the village.
Yeah. And so that's where all the youth meet. And so we're doing a Bible study program that covers the catechism, and we're doing it with those 3 youth there.
The 3 youth people in Nade Oulepregeli.
Oh, and you guys remember Paita Klusen. He was here and he shared. So we work very much with him.
We work very close with him, yeah.
Yeah, the way this guy has grown and how he's serving is just
it's phenomenal.
Really good. And he has a girlfriend now, by the way, from our mission team. So, yeah, anyways.
This is our church in Hacienda Verde. We have anywhere from 350 people that attend church on a slow morning. And if we have quite a bit of company, we will have 450 up to 500 people showing up in church there under kind of an open concept roof, because we're living in an area where it's pretty warm. We sometimes have flies, but other than that, it's really, really comfortable there. And so we, that was fast. We have a church board that you see there on the right, and that's our local church board. And so there's a few of us are missionaries in there, but over half of those people are already the local people. The goal of MEM is that we bring in we as missionaries we start a church, but then we phase out, and so we're in the process of phasing out.
So you can just kind of keep going to the next slide slowly. So we do pastoral work, lots of different things with that, meeting with people, some counseling stuff. And then the next slide, we try to do quite a bit of fellowship within Hacienda Verde. We make a lot of good friends where we live. And so I would say our whole community are friends of ours, and really the people we're serving become good friends. Next slide. And then we also go into the colony for visitations. We can't take pictures so much of the very traditional Old Colony Mennonites because it's just not appropriate. It wouldn't be, we can't always take pictures where we're visiting. So this particular couple where we're visiting is already kind of excluded out of their colony and are kind of outside of the church anyway, so it's easier to take pictures there. But we find with radio, it's really important to go out and actually do follow-up and do some visits.
The Hacienda Verde youth, we have a large youth. If the youth are all together, we have 2 youth groups. We have the junior youth and the senior youth. And so if they all come together with their youth leaders, we have up to 90 people show up. And so it's a really good program. Most of the people in Hacienda Verde, they come. And so we try to include them, and they play volleyball and soccer. We call it football in Bolivia, but they have a good time. There's a lot of people, they get saved in these sessions that we do. Many of the young people coming from the colony, they are searching for something, and they find salvation. They find in Hacienda Verde, which we're very, very thankful for, and they continue to grow.
So right now we're in the grounds of starting to put together a boys and girls home. We're very excited about that. So youth that comes from the colony that are looking for a place to get started, that are in search of truth, they're often only successful depending on where they land. And because we don't have a control of every family in the community. And so it's sometimes hard to see. There's youth that come out that are searching for truth, and then they don't really get what they need. So we're actually going to build a boys and girls home. We're very excited about this. We're going to be in search of like home parents that will take them in. It'll be like a program that they'll go through to help them spiritually, to help them with work, to help them with finances, to help them with just life, and then transition them out into the community. So we're very excited about that.
So this is our life now. And so you've heard a little bit about what we all do. We could spend hours and hours with you. But let me wrap this up with a little bit of application for us. Wherever God calls us is always the best place for us. It may not be a fun place, but it's the best place because all the other places are worse. If we live in God's call, we're at peace. If we do not live in God's call, or if we're outside of God's call, there will be turmoil in our lives. And so we will not have the peace of God. And so we want to have the peace of God. Let me read a few verses out of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 16 through 19. It says, "For if I preach the gospel, I have nothing to boast of, for necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, I've been entrusted with this stewardship." Let me put this into perspective. When I grew up, my dad was not the most graceful person around. And so if he told me that I had to go and shovel the manure out of the chicken coop, he didn't ask if I wanted to. He said, "Go do it." There was not a question if I wanted to. So I could do it willingly, or I could do it against my will, but you're going to do it anyway, boy. And God has a calling for us. And so here Paul says, necessity is laid upon me. Yes, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So if you are not in the calling where God wants you to be, woe is you. That's what he says it's what Paul is saying. And so, but if we do it willingly, we have a reward. And so some of these things, we've experienced a lot of hardships in our life, but man, is it ever rewarding. We have a full life. It is exciting to get up on Monday morning for us. And I know that for some of you it's not very exciting, but it should be exciting. What is my reward then? That when I preach the gospel, I may present the gospel of Christ without charge, that I may not abuse my authority in the gospel. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more. And so we become servants of the Lord. We become servants to the people with the intention of furthering the gospel. And our mandate in this whole life for the whole church, for every individual, is to build God's kingdom, is it not? That's what we are here assigned to do. That is the deal when we accept Jesus as personal Savior, that we are, by our faith, we will present this faith to other people so we can be in heaven together. Hallelujah. And so that is our whole purpose in our life, and we veer from that purpose so many times. So God's call does not depend on the circumstances we're in. Not everybody is called to Bolivia to be a missionary there, and we realize that fully. But God is calling every believer to a ministry without a doubt. Some of us may be within the will of God, but we see no fruit from our labor. We have seen a lot of fruit from our labor, but we worked very hard as well. When I get to heaven, I want to talk to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, he was a prophet. He prophesied for at least 40 years and told the people, if you do not turn around, disaster is going to happen. What happened? Disaster. And what did he do? We read that in Lamentations. It gives the appearance that he's looking over Jerusalem while it's smoking and dead bodies are strewn around, and he cries, "You know what I would have done? I told you so." That's what my fleshly experience would have been. He did not do that. He sat there and cried. Read Lamentations. You can still see the teardrops, in wet pages that he was writing. That was his mindset. When I get to heaven, I want to see Jeremiah. It's, he's just a hero for that reason. Just in closing, 2 Corinthians 9, verse 6 and 8. But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he proposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency and all things may have an abundance for every good work. Don't ever tell me I can't do that. God says, I have sufficient for all things. I can do it under God's call. So can you.
So we want to thank you guys for this opportunity that we could share a little bit with you. We had hoped to have our Christmas cards / prayer cards ready for you this Sunday. Bernie was kind enough to make them for us, but we didn't get them printed in time. So I'm hoping to have them in your mailboxes next Sunday. And also just on the back of there is our contact information. If you want to follow us, there's WhatsApp, there's Facebook. And then the other thing is, so we're with EMC missionaries. And so one of the things is we get 20% of our support we have to raise ourselves. And so on the prayer card at the back, there is a QR code. If all of you guys feel like the Lord is leading you to support us financially as well, there is a one-time donation or a monthly donor thing you can sign up for that will lead you to that website. But again, I know there's a lot of different places calling your name to give, and so, but it's just an opportunity if the Lord lays that on your heart.
But we invite you to partner with us in this ministry that we're doing.
Yeah. And so we want to quickly call up Danae yet. One of the things we have out in Bolivia is a lot of music. We have been privileged to get like university people from Paraguay that have majored in music to come and teach music out there. And so Plotich music, we sing everything in Low German mainly. We do some Spanish, but it has been what we sing out there. And so we want to give you a taste of some Plotich music here today, and I'll let Danae just quickly introduce her song. So thank you, guys.
This song that I'm going to sing is talking about how we can give our life to God, that we can, when He calls us, that we can give everything to Him. Min leven har nämnt död en den dagens för dig. Min leven har nämnt död för död för ett verkligt halt en leven för Gott. För arm och line död som min leven sen har en leven för Gott. För arm och line död som min leven sen. Dartinen yes vis med en weich. Vis med en väl med dina juen. Låt mig er kanen vad de viktigas. Jag bråkar mig inte så vält. Min leven har nämnt död en den dagens för dig. Min leven har nämnt död för död för ett verkligt halt en leven för Gott. För arm och line död som min leven sen har en leven för Gott. För arm och line död som min leven sen. Där dinen yes vis med din plon. En mina svaghet låt mig glöjven. En vanek forhæv du mig vara. Jag bråkar mig inte så vält. Min leven har nämnt död en den dagens för dig. Min leven har nämnt död